All right, welcome to another deep dive. I'm Mark Buzz.
And I'm Anna Bugs, ready to talk all things mice with you today.
That's right. Today, we're diving deep into the world of field mice in California. And we'll be using an article sent in by one of our listeners from Simple Pest Management.
Always good to hear from our listeners.
Absolutely. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, mice.
Maybe not the most exciting topic.
Right, but trust me, especially for those of you in California, you'll want to stick around. This is important stuff.
It really is.
This article had a fact that really surprised me. Field mice are active all year round in California.
Yeah, they don't take any seasonal breaks.
No rest for the wicked, I guess.
And they're incredibly adaptable, which can make them a real pain.
So when we say field mice, are we talking about just one type of mouse? Or
Well, no, not really. Field mice is more like an umbrella term. It refers to a whole group of small rodents.
okay, so like what kind of rodents are we talking about?
Well, you got the deer mouse, for example.
Deer mouse. That sounds kind of cute.
They can be. They have these big eyes and really soft fur, but they can cause a lot of problems.
Right, looks can be deceiving, I guess.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the California mouse. A little bit larger and tends to stick to California, like the name suggests.
Makes sense. The article also mentioned house mice.
Oh, yeah, those are the ones that love getting into our houses.
So even though they're called house mice, they often start out in the fields.
Right, and especially in Southern California, they often move from the fields right into our living spaces.
So we've got all these different types of mice running around. They're adaptable. And I'm guessing they reproduce pretty quickly.
Oh, incredibly quickly. A female mouse can have up to 6 litters per year.
6? Wow. How many baby mice per litter?
Anywhere from 5 to 12.
So yeah, you can see how a small mouse problem could get out of hand pretty fast.
For sure.
Besides being kind of, well, gross, what's the real harm in having a few mice around?
Well, they can carry some serious diseases. Hantavirus, salmonella, leptospirosis.
Oh, wow.
And it's not just the diseases themselves. Their droppings and urine can cause allergies and even respiratory problems.
Yikes. Anything else?
Don't forget about fire hazards.
Fire hazards. From mice.
Yeah, they love to chew on electrical wires. A mouse nest near wiring is a recipe for disaster.
So we're talking about potential health risks, property damage, and even fire hazards. This is starting to sound a lot more serious than just a minor nuisance.
Yeah, it can definitely escalate quickly.
That's why it's so important to catch an infestation early. What are some signs that we might have mice?
It's a bit like being a detective. You've got to look for clues.
Okay, I'm ready to put on my detective hat. What am I looking for?
The first clue is droppings. You'll find these tiny little pellets, usually near food sources.
Got it. What else?
Gnaw marks. Their teeth never stop growing, so they have to constantly gnaw on things. You might see teeth marks on furniture, baseboards, even wiring.
Right. Makes sense.
And don't forget to check for nests. They build these cozy little nests out of shredded paper, fabric, anything they can find, really. Usually tucked away in quiet corners or behind appliances.
So if I see any of these signs, chances are I've got mice.
Exactly.
And that's when I need to start thinking about how to get rid of them. What are my options?
Well, if it's a really small infestation, some people try to handle it themselves.
Right, like with traps and stuff.
Yeah, snap traps or live traps can work okay if there aren't too many mice.
What about those ultrasonic devices? Do those actually work?
It's debatable. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Not the most reliable solution.
So DIY might work for a small problem, but what if it's a full-blown infestation?
Then it's time to call in the professionals. Like Simple Pest Management, they've got a 3-step approach to dealing with mice.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, the first step is a thorough inspection. They identify the type of mouse, figure out how they're getting in, and find any nests.
So they basically get a complete understanding of the situation before doing anything.
Exactly. And then comes exclusion, where they seal up all the entry points so the mice can't get back in.
Makes sense.
And finally, there's sanitation. They clean and disinfect all the affected areas.
So they're not just getting rid of the mice, they're making sure the house is safe and clean afterward.
Right. It's a very thorough and responsible approach, which is important when you consider.
When you consider what?
Well, that field mice actually play a pretty important role in the ecosystem.
Oh, yeah, that's true. They help spread seeds, they help plants regenerate, and they're a food source for other animals.
Exactly. So it's not about completely wiping them out. It's about learning to coexist peacefully
Right.
and preferably not inside our houses.
Right. That's where a company like Simple Pest Management can really help.
For sure.
They can help us strike that balance, letting field mice do their thing in nature while keeping our homes mouse-free.
And speaking of homes, it looks like Simple Pest Management covers a pretty big area of California.
That's right. The article mentions Sacramento and San Diego, which are on completely opposite ends of the state.
So it seems like no matter where you are in California, they can help.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. Before we move on, let's quickly recap what we've learned so far about these year-round residents.
Yeah.
First, we talked about how field mice isn't just one type of mouse.
It's a whole bunch of different rodents.
Deer mice, California mice, house mice, all incredibly adaptable and incredibly good at making more mice.
Exactly.
And we talked about the real risks they pose, not just to our homes, but to our health as well.
Very important to remember.
We learned how to be mouse detectives.
Droppings, gnaw marks, nests.
And finally, we talked about the options for getting rid of them. DIY solutions for small problems,
And professional help for those bigger infestations.
like Simple Pest Management.
Exactly.
Their three-step approach seems very thorough.
It is.
And remember, early detection and action are key. The sooner you deal with a mouse problem, the easier it will be to control.
Couldn't agree more.
Great advice. We'll be back in just a bit to wrap up this deep dive. And hey, if you're enjoying this episode, don't forget to like and follow us. We appreciate your support.
We really do.
Before we went to the break, we were talking about Simple Pest Management's three-step process: inspection, exclusion, and sanitation. It sounds pretty thorough, but what makes them different from other pest control companies?
That's a really good question. Well, based on this article, it seems like Simple Pest Management is really big on eco-friendly solutions.
Okay, so they're not just focused on getting rid of the mice. They're also thinking about the impact on the environment.
Right.
So they're not just exterminators, but more like ecosystem-minded pest managers.
Yeah, I like that. It seems like they're taking a more holistic approach.
Which makes sense, right? Especially when you think about how field mice are actually a pretty important part of the California ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. They're crucial for seed dispersal, which helps our native plants to survive, and they're a food source for larger predators like owls and snakes.
Right, so it's all about finding that balance, letting them exist in their natural habitat, but keeping them out of our homes.
Exactly. And that's where Simple Pest Management's approach really seems to stand out.
Yeah.
They get that, we need to coexist with these creatures, but in a way that keeps everyone safe and healthy.
Simple Pest Management seems to cover a pretty large service area.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The article mentioned that they operate in both Sacramento and San Diego.
Wow. Yeah, that's a huge area. Those are two totally different environments.
So it seems like no matter where you are in California, whether you're dealing with deer mice in your backyard or house mice in your city apartment, they can probably help.
Definitely. And I love their tagline, "Got bugs? The answer is simple."
Catchy, risky.
Yeah, and it makes you feel like, okay, they know what they're doing.
So they offer this comprehensive and eco-friendly approach to mouse control. They've got this big service area and a catchy tagline.
It seems like they've got it all figured out.
Okay, so for everyone listening, what are the key takeaways here in our battle against these little guys?
Well, I'd say the biggest one is early detection and action.
Right, so don't wait until you have a huge mouse problem to do something about it.
Exactly. The quicker you take care of it, the easier it is to get under control.
And if you're not really sure what to do, or if the problem just seems too big to handle yourself.
Don't hesitate to call in a professional.
Exactly, a professional pest control company like Simple Pest Management.
They have the experience and the tools to get rid of those mice safely and effectively. And like we were saying earlier, they're not just focused on getting rid of the mice, they're also committed to protecting your home and the environment.
Awesome advice. That wraps up our deep dive into the world of field mice in California. I hope you found this helpful, even, dare I say, a little entertaining.
It's always interesting to learn more about the creatures we share our planet with, even the ones we don't always want in our houses.
Right. And hey, if you like this episode, don't forget to like and follow us. We'd love to have you back for more deep dives.
We appreciate all of your support.
And one last thing, if you want more tips on pest control, follow Simple Pest Management on social media.
Good idea.
All right. That's it for today. See you next time on the deep dive. We've been talking about how to get rid of mice, but what about preventing them in the first place?
Oh, that's such an important point. Prevention is definitely key.
Yeah. So what can our listeners do to make their homes less attractive to mice?
Well, a lot of it comes down to good sanitation.
Makes sense, right? They're attracted to food.
Exactly. So keep your kitchen clean, store all your food in airtight containers, and don't leave any crumbs or spills lying around.
Yeah, don't leave out the welcome mat.
Right. And be careful about pet food, too. Store it securely and clean up any spills right away.
Good point. What about outside the house? Any tips for keeping mice away from the yard?
Landscaping is important. Mice like to hide in tall grass and overgrown shrubs, so keeping your yard nice and trimmed can definitely help.
So it's about good housekeeping, both inside and out.
Absolutely. And remember all that stuff we talked about earlier about sealing up entry points.
Right, that was part of Simple Pest Management's exclusion phase. But what kind of entry points should people be looking for?
Mice can squeeze through really tiny spaces, so you want to check for cracks and gaps in your foundation, around doors and windows, even where utility pipes and wires come into your house.
So a good weekend project might be to walk around the house with a tube of caulk.
Exactly. A little preventative maintenance can go a long way.
Well, I think we've covered pretty much everything there is to know about field mice in California.
We really have.
We learned about the different types of mice, the risks they pose, how to spot an infestation, and even some ways to prevent mice in the first place.
And we discussed professional pest control.
Right, especially simple pest management and their eco-friendly methods.
It's been a really informative deep dive.
It has. And hopefully our listeners feel better prepared to handle any mouse issues they might encounter.
Definitely. And if you do have a mouse situation...
Remember, got bugs. The answer is simple.
Exactly.
Well, folks, knowledge is power. And now you got the knowledge to keep those field mice out in the fields where they belong.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration into, well, whatever interesting topic we find ourselves diving into next.
Until then, stay curious.